All right, class, it's time to start chapter 16. It's in your book at the beginning of page, starting on page 438. We'll read the story that's in the front of the chapter in class. Look, this chapter is about waste. It's about garbage. And you might think, well, what's garbage got to do with the environment? Actually, quite a lot. First of all, it offers an environmental problem because if there's more people on Earth than ever before, there's more waste being generated by us than ever before. And almost always, habitat destruction is a good answer. So there's one of the problems right there. We need space for all the trash that we produce, all of the garbage. Also, there's the scientific concept of recycling. You know, if there was not a human on planet Earth, everything else in the ecosystem is designed to replenish itself, to recycle itself, and to eventually end up correctly back in the environment, to take elements and molecules out of the system. Organisms use it, but then organisms put it back into the system. So it's a big round circle, as we'll see when I start this first video. So we humans are unbalancing that nice circle, and we are producing waste that doesn't break down in nature, that isn't something that's easy to recycle. So in this chapter, we're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss what our garbage contains and how we deal with it. There's a couple of different ways we deal with it, and some environmental rules and regulations that have to do with the way we deal with our garbage, landfills. You can't just dig a hole and dump your stuff there anymore. There's rules and regulations about that are environmentally sensitive. They're designed to do better for the environment. We'll learn about the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. Then the second half of the book of this chapter deals with hazardous waste, in particular, really nasty chemicals that we have to dispose of specially. And then the last part of the chapter deals with solutions. So let's get the first part going. Let's discuss what's in our garbage cans here in the U.S. and around the world. This ought to be a short and sweet video. Let's hope so anyway. And it starts with understanding how we deal with our garbage, and indeed what our garbage consists of. Remember something that we talked about when we talked about how to clean up water. Our garbage is in a similar situation. You take it out to the curb and the guy picks it up. There's no rules or regulations about what you're allowed to throw away. Just like there's no rules or regulations about what you dump down your sink or your toilet. So we have to design systems that can sort of deal with all of that stuff. And that's where municipal solid waste comes in. This is the diagram that I was telling you about that just kind of shows you how in nature, in a natural ecosystem, inputs are used, even energy is inputted into the system. We then use the raw materials, I'm talking about organisms in the ecosystem, not really humans, and then all of that usage, the product may even get reused, but the product gets used and reused and it cycles around, but eventually it outlives its usefulness and becomes output. But notice when it becomes output, most of the material in nature can be recycled. And that's how nature works. I mean, that's how this planet operates. If this planet was a spaceship hurtling through space, we have to have a way to deal with all of the waste, all of the outputs. And it's dealt with naturally in the ecosystem by all living things. Now we get into the picture. There's 6.5 billion of us, and we unbalance this ecosystem. Not everything that we make, not every raw material that we make, we humans, ends up being able to be recycled. And it certainly cannot be disposed of properly. So we have to be careful of that. The important thing for you to remember from this slide basically is we, through our actions, through our daily lives, are unbalancing what we could consider a natural ecosystem. It's not a human failing. It's more about modernity, modernness. Cavemen didn't unbalance the ecosystem, but there are so many of us with all of our modern conveniences and substances and materials that unbalances the ecosystem. All right, we define the garbage that goes out into your trash can as something called MSW. You can bet I'll be asking you that on your quiz. What does MSW stand for? Municipal Solid Waste. And MSW is all of the garbage, refuse is garbage, all of the refuse collected from houses, from businesses, institutions, schools, prisons. All of the garbage that ends up at the dump is called MSW, Municipal Solid Waste. You're just going to have to memorize that term. This graph here, that's on page 439 in your book, shows you that we are definitely generating more waste as the years go on. And this is just since 1960 here. But you can see that in total, we're generating more garbage, but not just in general, but also per capita. In other words, each of us is actually producing, I should say, more garbage. Now, there was a slight downturn right here. I wonder if you can explain why the slight downturn. It seems to be happening around the year 2008. Anyway, there's our problem. Not only is our total garbage going up, that would be a function of lots of extra people, but each person is generating more garbage than ever before. What is the composition of our MSW? We call it the waste stream. What ends up going from your house where you purchase goods back to the dump? And by the way, there is a better scientific term for the dump. It is called the sanitary landfill. And there are lots of good rules and regulations about what the sanitary landfill is all about. And I got a diagram to show you about that in another video. All right, so let's talk about what is in our solid waste. First of all, you need to memorize this fact. It's on every AP exam I've ever seen. The number one component of MSW is paper products. In fact, 1/3 of the garbage that you throw out is paper or paper products. Now you see this other one is 33%, and you think, okay, well that's higher, organic materials. But in all of the statistics that we read concerning MSW, they divide these out separately. So each one is its own separate deal. And when you do that, none of them equals 31% separately. They only add up to 33% because they're in total. 12% plastic. More on plastic later. Plastic is the unnatural addition that we make to the ecosystem. It's a man-made substance. It doesn't break down in nature, and there's so much of it that we have to deal with in our lives. Organic material, of course, is going to break down, isn't it? I mean, sure it is. And that's the concept behind composting. Whether it's yard waste, food waste, or wood, these are organic materials that break down. And for that matter, you know darn well that paper is an organic material. It breaks down. So it's these things that don't break down, like plastic. Durable goods, things like wash machines and dryers that you don't use anymore. We have to do something with them. They have to be sent to a dump, a landfill somewhere. Tires, cars, they are called durable goods because they're big and they last a long time. But once they die and they're relegated to the scrap heap, we have to deal with that scrap. This diagram shows it better because it has the food scraps, the yard trimmings, and the wood shown to you separately. And now you get the picture. Out of all of these different pieces of the pie, what's number one? Paper is the number one material that's in your garbage. Rubber and leather, again, some things that don't break down very well, 8%. Plastics, we just talked about. You get the idea. So on this graph, you can see that from wood all the way over here to paper, 31 plus 33%, 64% of our materials, 64, are compostable. All right, that means that we can separate them from our garbage and break them down ourselves. These other ones, not so much. We have to come up with another neat idea to deal with these four things. But 64%, I mean, that's a pretty decent number. 64% we can break down, compost. The last part of this video that I care for you to understand is all about e-waste. Obviously, in our society today, this has become a new concern. Not so much in a developing country. They don't have a lot of electronic materials. They don't have computers, cell phones, stereos, iPods, etc. But, you know, the construction of these things uses a lot of very, very bad toxic metals. Metals that we know are carcinogenic. Well, here's the deal. One of the things that we seem to be doing increasingly in the developed countries is using the developing countries as our garbage dump for e-waste. And I'll tell you a story that was on 60 Minutes just a while back of a town, I don't even remember where it was, somewhere in Africa, Nigeria I think, where we are shipping, the whole town is comprised of old computers. And this is what they do, like what this lady's doing here. They make money by taking all of the components, melting them down, and separating out the precious metals and trying to sell back the plastics. You can see all these are like motherboard type things. All of these chemicals are toxic. I mean, this lady is gonna die when she's 30 because of all of the buildup of all of these chemicals that she's getting through her skin, that she's breathing in through her nose. You get the idea. And it's not just these motherboards either. What about the big metal cases? They have to be dealt with too. What's in the CRT? Do you remember those? I mean, you have a flat screen on your computer now, but computers used to have a big old TV. CRT, cathode ray tube. Those things are filled with toxic metals. So increasingly, we have to find ways to deal with our e-waste. Congress has passed legislation that now makes it illegal for companies to get rid of televisions, computers, and so forth, so-called e-waste, by taking it to other countries. These other countries, don't get me wrong, we're willing to take it. For a fee, they'll store it. For a fee, they'll stick it in everybody's village. These corrupt governments don't care about their people. And so their people are subjected to these hazardous, toxic materials. Okay, that's a brief overview of what we're talking about here when it comes to your MSW. The next section is about reduce, reuse, and recycle. And there's a lot in there. There's a lot for us to cover. So we'll do that in the next video. Thanks for listening.